When I designed my new Ontario Northland layout, I realized that I was going to have access to some storage under the stairs. So once again, just like on my old layout, I was going to have to build a drop section. So let's get started. Since this was my second drop section, I was going to take advantage of the fact that I had built one previously. I was going to use or reuse some of the hardware, such as the hinge and the slide bolts. Plus, I was going to kind of mimic what I did before. The one big difference was this one will not have the auto shutoff on the track, being that the storage area behind would not be used that often and would not be used during railway operation. Whereas the layout in Milton, the Okanagan Valley Railway, did go across the entrance, and it did have to have that auto shutoff as a safety measure. I'll leave the link to that video above so that you can check that out if you do need to have some sort of auto shut off mechanism on your drop section and if you're going to build a drop section. For the layout, I was going to use basically strand board for the drop section and the two approach pieces. Basically, it was all one piece of wood which I laid out and then I cut, and you can see it laid out here in the picture. I highly recommend that you do not use natural wood because it tends to expand quite a bit in the warmer temperature and contract quite a bit, whereas strand board, plywood, things like that don't do that as much. You could also look at possibly using metal. The other thing I would recommend is building it in the warmer temperature when it's bigger, because it can contract and you can build for that. You can't really build for expansion. In this picture, you can see I've made the cuts on both ends. So now the one pieces become three. There's the approaches from either end, and the drop section, which is resting on top of my yardstick. Now on top of that, don't be too afraid when you make the cuts. Obviously, it's going to create the gaps, and you're going to need some sort of gaps anyway, as long as it's close enough to make the join up at each end, whatever you use, in my case, the slide bolt. So here's the hinge at the one end and the single slide bolt. You can see I just used scrap pieces of wood that match up, and that's how I join up the hinge and the slide bolt to the strand board. And in the next picture, you can see that's at the other end where I've got the two slide bolts. That's the part that will actually drop down. And then what I did for good measure is on top of that, I also did some testing with it all screwed in place before I put the drop section up to make sure that the slide bolts slid comfortably across. And then I was able to install everything with regards to the two end pieces and the drop section on the layout. Before I actually screwed down the ends, I clamped them into place, and then in this video you can see I am once again testing the drop section again. It doesn't hurt to test, retest, test again, because once you got in place it's more difficult to make the adjustments, so best to do as much as you can up front. I repeated the process with the foam as I had done with the strand board. I laid a big piece down and then I cut it in line with the cuts with the strand board. I had later did the same thing with the cork that went on top of the foam, but here's a picture of the foam being glued into place here. Now, I did mention before that you should try and make all the adjustments ahead of time. Well, lo and behold, when I was making this video, I found that because of all the bracing pieces I put in, which I'll show in a minute, I put too many in and it was too stiff. As you can see, I'm struggling away here trying to loosen up the slide bolts on the one end. In order to prevent the lift section from going too far up and possibly bumping the track, because it does overlap a bit on the one side, I put in what I call stabilizing pieces. So you can see the one here circled in green, that's on the top, and I later added ones on the bottom to keep it from going up from the bottom part. Now you can see the one circled in red. That was the one that was giving the problem. It was just too tight in there. It was causing the binding in the slide bolts. So I quickly removed that. And the one in green I kept. So I have one on the bottom and I have one on the top, which prevents any kind of additional movement of the drop section of it going too high and actually knocking the track out of alignment. So with that adjustment made, let's give it another quick test. So once I took out that stabilizing piece on the one side, as you can see in this video, drop section works a lot better, and that's exactly what you want. You want something that's going to work rather easily and smoothly. So anyway, I'll end this with a couple of test trains going across the drop section, because obviously you want to see it in action. Not only does it successfully drop and go back in place, but also trains can run across without derailment. Thank you for watching my channel. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button. And if you want to see more of my content about model trains and the development of my HO scale Ontario Northland, please subscribe now.